of all the coaches that are successful in the SEC, is there one that you would be any more concerned as a fan base that might leave college football for the NFL than Josh Heupel? I would argue no. It's not close. Nick Saban did it before, checked that box off the resume, didn't go very well, and he's old at this point. Kirby Smart, I don't think his style fits, and he's a former Georgia football player. He's not going anywhere, and he's got things rolling. As a matter of fact, I can't think of anybody else, with the exception of maybe Steve Sarkisian, who will come into the SEC, that a fan base would be like, oh no, the NFL is coming, Caleb. Is there any other coach out there that strikes you in the soon-to-be expanded SEC that you would be nervous about losing to the NFL, more so than Tennessee should be?
I would think maybe the closest one is Brian Kelly, but Brian Kelly is also a little bit older, like you pointed out. But I think those would be the top two. I would say Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly. I think Brian Kelly did flirt with the Eagles years ago when he was with Notre Dame. But I'm with you. I think Josh Heupel's at the top of the list, particularly because when you compare Josh Heupel and Brian Kelly, if you talk about the stresses of recruiting, you and I have talked about it. You don't really have to work that hard to recruit at LSU. I mean, you can just need a car. You need the university to give you a credit card with gas money, and you will find guys in that state.
Well, and then you can still be, you can be Ed Orgeron and still get in trouble just in the car because he was pulled over at a gas station when he tried to pick up one of the biggest boosters' wives who was pregnant and said she's not interested. But you can still get in.
Nothing to do with anything.
Yeah. Well, you need help pumping that gas. That was more like a David Letterman impression. I've been watching some Letterman lately. No, I don't know of any other coach that you covet in the SEC that could go. Brian Kelly, if he were 15 years younger, 10 years younger, I would say yes. I could see him winning a couple of championships at LSU and making the bowl. So let's get into some of these changes because they're very significant. And also, we want to talk before the end of the program, and the reason we're not tackling it right now is we might have a very special guest before the end of the show, and we're looking forward to that because there's a young man named Jake Merklinger who's going to announce his decision tomorrow. Why does Tennessee need a quarterback? Well, you always got to keep the cupboard stocked, but I'm not sure why they're being so aggressive for the young man who's going to announce tomorrow, and he will decide Jake Merklinger out of Georgia between Georgia, Michigan State, and North Carolina. So we may have a very special guest that has some insight into his recruiting. But first, some of these recruiting changes I want to get to. Good morning to everyone. And then we had a Riley vote, Smoky Mountain Red. I'm not sure. Oh, he said SEC. Yes, I could see Lincoln Riley of Southern Cal headed off. But just SEC, I think Tennessee would have the greatest concern of a guy that says, hey, I've achieved this in 3 or 4 years. I want to try the NFL like Nick Saban did. So a couple of different changes. So throw them at me if you can, Caleb, and I'll tell you my thoughts if it helps college coaches manage what right now is just an impossibly stupid year schedule. It's just there's no way coaches can do this for 20, 25, 30 years like, say, defensive lineman for the Vols, Rodney Garner. You just can't keep up this pace. So throw some of these changes at me, and I'll give you a thumbs up, thumbs down. And by the way, give us a thumbs up. We appreciate that. A like on the channel, and that brings more people in. So let's get it rolling. What do you got?
All right, so a few of these, the first few, I don't actually think gives coaches a break. I think it could be more stressful. So you give me your thoughts. The first one is coaches can now visit juniors in person starting January the 1st of their junior year. That's 11 months earlier than usual.
So essentially what you're doing is you're bumping up the calendar because it's already been bumped up. So June, which will come up, used to be December and January, where you would have all of these visitors in. So I think you're allowing guys a little bit more time to get to know players. So that turns into more recruiting time, but I think you get ahead of the curve a little bit. So I actually think that helps.
So you think it takes away from the stress of the December month, basically?
Yes, of trying to jam everybody in. So while that sounds like more recruiting time, I like that one from a coach's perspective.
Okay. This one's probably similar then. contact is now allowed with rising seniors from, well, these aren't, by the way, when I say now, these haven't gone into effect. These are proposed. They're going to discuss it next month. I guess we should get that out there. These aren't official yet. But okay, so the next one is contact would be allowed with rising seniors from April 15th to Memorial Day. Right now, that's right after spring practice, before the summer, and you're only allowed to evaluate players during that time and not contact them.
Again, I think that's just so that's just an evaluation period, but you can allow contact now. I think that's just moving things up in the schedule. It sounds like more work, but I think it's more productive work. I mean, you can step right now. The problem that coaches that I talk to are having is that they have to give out offers because they're not really sure if a guy's interested or not. And they've got to keep up with the Joneses. So,
not the Butch Joneses.
What's that?
I said not the Butch Joneses.
No, not the Butch Joneses. But if you have to do that, here's the problem: is that you're offering guys that you don't really know, and those are fake offers, non-committable offers. And my least favorite term is committable offer in all of recruiting. So again, I think you're giving coaches more of an opportunity to get to know these kids. Again, sounds like more work, but I think it just gives you more time in the calendar. So what's next?
Okay, so the third one is they're moving up when schools are allowed to initiate calls with prospects from September the 1st of their junior year to June the 15th after their sophomore year. So that's roughly 2.5 months when you can first initiate contact with a player.
You're getting the summer again, moving up the calendar. I'm okay with that. I think we're getting into the stupid realm, though, big picture of recruiting guys when they're underclassmen, and even Tennessee's supposedly recruiting a guy that Caleb Giroux wrote about, or is recruiting a guy that's an 8th grader. So I think that gets into a little bit of silliness before their bodies have developed. But I get the point. Make that window a little bit bigger. So I'm okay with that. Now,
and to be fair, you can't evaluate any more about a sophomore on June 15th than you can September 1st. High school football has just started. You got 1 week's worth of their junior year.
Yeah, but you can see a lot of growth in that summer when they're in the weight room, I would argue. To me, recruiting sophomores for the most part is a fruitless endeavor because you don't know what they're going to be. There are 10, 20% that are the Peyton Mannings of the world. I know Kyler Murray was one of those guys that we did a lot on ESPN on when he was an underclassman because you knew he was going to be that good. But for the most part, I think you're spinning your wheels. I think 10, 20% that you go after as a late sophomore in this case will probably not pan out. But if that's what they want to do, go for it. And with the early signing period, everything's moved up. So what else we got?
And then the last one, and I think this is the one that gives coaches the big break. So it's a decrease in the evaluation periods for the whole staff. In the fall, the proposal is to decrease the number of evaluation days from 42 to 33. And then in the spring, it's to decrease the evaluation period from 168 to 140. So we're talking a combination of 37 days that they're eliminating in recruiting that you're allowed to recruit. And I guess that's what the coaches really want. No, so long as no coaches can take part in this, they're all getting a break.
Right. That is the highlight. And there's no question about it that college coaches, if they're going to hang out longer in college and not go to the NFL, this would be slightly the game changer. So, I mean, the schedule right now is unfair. It's brutal. It's absolutely horrible. So I'm a proponent of all of these because even though it may look like more work, it moves the schedule up from the college's standpoint, where I think they were chasing their tails a lot because you had an early signing period, but no more contact / evaluation period. So decreasing the fall evaluation period is a big one to me too, that actually puts the rubber on the road as far as fewer days where you have to be working. I think this is all very important. Pete Thamel, who I trust, if he's reporting this as possibilities, I think they probably end up happening, Caleb. And I will say I would be all for this, and I will talk to some coaches this week to see what they think about the changes. But to me, this makes the schedule more palatable. You?
I agree. I think that's a big one. I got a question for you real quick, because I think you and I both agree that even though we know that. Let's take a Dan Mullen, for example. We know Dan Mullen was not that big into recruiting, but is a great game planner. Do you think this recruiting calendar is really what did him in? Because he's not. Do you think a guy like Dan Mullen now might be able to come back into the college coaching ranks and be successful with this rollback of the calendar? Because he doesn't like to work that hard on recruiting.
It is really funny that you bring that up. I wouldn't have chosen him as the symbol, the guy who is emblematic of that, but he might well be, because he kind of hit a time at Florida where you should be able to recruit at a high level, but he didn't. Well, why not? The only reason that you could possibly come up with is the fact that the recruiting calendar had gotten so advanced and he didn't keep up and didn't like recruiting anyway. I hadn't thought of that name, but that might be the best possible example, Caleb, of a guy who's like, man, this ain't cool.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I feel like Dan Mullen nowadays, I mean, I think you and I both agree, there's no way Steve Spurrier would be coaching college with this recruiting calendar, right? He would hate every bit of it. And
not the proposed one, but the one that's in place.
The one that's in place, yeah. Yeah, the one that's in place now.
Completely 110% agree. He would have hated this. I don't know that he would have done well in the NFL because, quite frankly, he didn't do well in the NFL. So,
are there other coaches that you could think of that were great, that were like, they were great because of, I guess, a little more X's and O's, and they weren't crazy about recruiting, and this calendar just would have wrecked them?
Again, I can't come up with an example that I think even compares to Steve Spurrier. I thought he was a great example. I don't know that he would have had success in the NFL, but I think that's a very good example. I really believe that this recruiting calendar, as far as driving off coaches, and I'm not saying this because we talk about Tennessee a lot, and I'm not saying this to try to get people riled up, but I think the coach in the nation, the entire nation, that fans should be most concerned would say, to heck with this, would be Josh Heupel in 5 years from now. I mean, he's got plenty of juice and energy. He's in his early 40s now, but what happens when you're in your mid 40s? What happens when you're a little bit later? Maybe you've had some success. And once you've had that success, you think, I could work less in the NFL, make as much or more money, and make a lot of the key decisions. I want to make that move. That's exactly what Nick Saban did.
And the big selling point for that, if you're a coach like Josh Heupel, and I think this applies to a lot of coaches, it's definitely applied to Saban, is if you're a successful college coach who doesn't succeed in the NFL, you know there's going to be another college job waiting for you afterward. It's not like you're going to be out of a job when you get fired by the NFL at that point. So you don't have to worry about, there's this whole, like, don't take this job, you risk ruining your career because you're not going to last long. And then and I get that's probably a thing in the NFL, but if you're a high profile college coach, there's going to be a bunch of schools line up that will fire their coach to hire you if you were successful in college beforehand.
Yes. South Carolina would have legalized cockfighting in order to get Steve Spurrier to be their head coach.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. What do you need? What do you possibly need? All right. So I think this is all good. I think these are the little things that you need to root for if you want Josh Heupel to have longevity at Tennessee, which I believe he will. But, we're always, in whatever job we do, we think to ourselves, could things be a little bit better? Could the grass be greener on the other side? So these are all things that I think help Tennessee maintain their relationship with Josh Heupel for not just 2 or 3 or 4 years. I'm not talking about that. I'm to the point I'm beyond Josh Heupel just being at Tennessee for 3 or 4 years, Caleb. I don't know about you. I'm really thinking about this, and I never say this about coaches. I didn't say it about Urban Meyer at Florida, Dan Mullen at Florida. I'm not going to say it about Brian Kelly. I don't think he coaches there for 10 years at LSU. Nick Saban would be the exception to the rule. But as far as the young coaches, that age isn't against them, I think Josh Heupel, I'm thinking along the lines of 8, 10, 12 years that he could be at Tennessee because of the fit. I don't think that's a stretch at all. 2 years under his belt, 8 more years. If you had to take the over under, I'll put it at 7.5. So that'd be a number of 10 total years. Would you take the over or the under that he's at Tennessee? Given his success, given his perceived love for the program, what would you take?
Yeah, I would take the over. And also, I think 10 years isn't bad.
You realize how crazy, though, that what we're saying, though, that a guy's going to be at a job for 10 years.
Oh, exactly.
And we both agree.
But the mistake I think a lot of it's funny because the mistake I think Tennessee lucked into it. I think the mistake a lot of athletic directors make, and I want to know your thoughts on this. I think they too often sacrifice good hires because they're looking for the guy that's going to be there 20 years. And in my opinion, a lot of times, this is why I love what LSU did with Brian Kelly. They know Brian Kelly's not a 20-year head coach. You're right. He's a 5 to 7 year head coach at best. But the way LSU was thinking is, you know what? We might get 2 or 3 national championships in those 5 or 7 years. Look at Miami in the 80s. Miami didn't make one hire in the 80s. There's not one head coach that lasted more than like 5 years at Miami. But they all got a national championship when they were there. And would you not take a 5-year run with a national title over a 15-year run of success? I think this is a big problem in college athletics. Everybody wants the guy that's usually late 30s, early 40s that they think can be there for 20 years. They're trying to find him somewhere. And a lot of times you have a proven commodity elsewhere that could do better.
No, I would totally take the short. If Tennessee fans, I believe, were asked right now, you can have Josh Heupel for 5 years and win a national title, or you can have him for 10 years and win 3 SEC championships, 4 SEC championships. I think they would take the national title, but I think you're going to get both. And again, I'm the guy that's viewed, for those of you that don't know me from years ago, I'm the guy that's often viewed as a cynic. I like Caleb because I think he's a little cynical too as well, or at least realistic. Let's use that word. But I think the best days, I mean, enjoy 2022, but I believe firmly, objectively, that the best days are ahead for Josh Heupel and Tennessee. John said, sure would love to see Spurrier throw down his visor again. Meant you were getting under his skin. That's the only thing I'd change about Josh Heupel if he were just snarky. If he, after that Missouri game when he punched that one in, and if he just said, well, their job to stop me. If he said something like that, Spurrier style, that's the only thing I would change about Josh Heupel is I would make him snarkier and a smart aleck. I think that would be fantastic.
It also responded to the media some with his strategy. My favorite Spurrier thing is every now and then there was a game against Tennessee where, so he got criticism for running up the score. And then the next year he decided, well, I got a 35-0 lead. I'm going to sit on the lead just to stick it to the media. He did that just to make a point and went away from his style. And I'm sorry, a lot of Vol fans at the time, Peyton Manning was the worst of this. Like, I'm so glad we fought back. It was only 35-29. I'm like, okay, you guys didn't really fight back. Spurrier called off the dogs. Let's call it what it is.